Okay, first of all, welcome everyone to this webinar. It's part of the Global Neuroscience Horizon organized by IBRO. IBRO is the Global Association of Neuroscience Society established in 1961 that aims to promote and support neuroscience around the world. And the IBRO mission is to develop, support, coordinate, and promote scientific research in all fields concerning the brain, promote international collaboration and exchange of scientific information on brain research through the world, and provide for and assist in education, dissemination, information relating to brain research. This IBRO-LARC, that is the chapter for Latin America and Caribbean, webinar on inclusion and diversity in Latin American neuroscience, is the fourth IBRO Global Neuroscience Horizon webinar series this year. And we, as member of IBRO-LARC, we feel a responsibility to advance in the field of the gender equality, and we conducted a study together with the Economic Commission of Latin America and Caribbean, ECLAC, or CEPAL in Spanish, from the United Nations, and with the financial support of IBRO on gender inclusion and diversity in Latin American neuroscience. The study was published as a long report, is the basis of our present webinar. Our panelists will discuss the main obstacles to diversity and inclusion faced by the neuroscience community based in the region, some of which are distinctive to Latin America, and some are which are very global, of global interest. Our program, and I want to introduce myself. I'm Adrián Palacios, chair of IBRO-LARC, and I am professor of the Faculty of Science at the Universidad de Valparaíso, and also researcher of the Interdisciplinary Center of Neuroscience in Valparaíso. I'm the actual president of IBRO-LARC, and I'm working myself in neuroscience, in sensory biology, and also I am current member of the Advisory Council on Gender Equity and Ministerial Advisory Council of the Ministry of Science in Chile. And remember that you can send to any time the questions through the chat that we're gonna be looking at the right moment. And we're gonna have two blocks today in this webinar. The first one is an evaluation of gender inequities in Latin American neuroscience community. And our first speaker is gonna be Ana Silva, that is IBRO-LARC and an IBRO-LARC member. She's a professor and PhD in biological science at the University of La República in Uruguay. And she worked in the neuroendocrine basis of social behavior. And as I say, is a member of long time of IBRO-LARC committee and collaborated with the member of this panel on gender inequality in the Latin American neuroscience community, that's the work that has been already published. And she's also the current president of the Uruguayan Society of Neuroscience. The second speaker in the first block is Verónica Amarante from ECLAC-Montevideo, Uruguay. She's a professor of the Institute of Economics of the Faculty of Economics and Administration of the University of the República in Uruguay. And also she's member of the National System of Researchers from Uruguay as well. And she's also a researcher and the partnership of the economic policy. She was director of the ECLAC office in Montevideo and worked in the social development division of ECLAC. Her research interests are development, economic, gender, and labor economics, emphasizing Uruguay and Latin America. And the second block is about pathway to inclusion in the Latin American neuroscience community, and it's going to be our speaker is Francesca Cirulli from ALBA network. She's on the board of directors of the ALBA network and is a key IBRO panel for diversity and inclusion. She's the principal investigator and group leader at the Center of Behavioral Science and Mental Health of the Istituto Superiore di Sanità in Roma, Italy. She holds a PhD in neurobiology from Stanford University, and she works on the role of early experience in brain development and plasticity. She's associated editor of the journal Frontier in Behavioral Neuroscience and Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Review. So then we're gonna have, after these two blocks that are linked together, that we're gonna learn this in the talk that follows. And then we're gonna have, 10 to 15 minutes for questions in general, but also if we have time, we're gonna have questions in the middle of, the transition from the first and to the second block. So now I'm gonna give the welcome to Ana Silva to present his work. So welcome, Ana. You can now share your screen.
Thank you, Adrián. Please let me know if you are seeing my screen now.
Yes, we do.
Are you seeing the presentation or?
Yes.
The whole thing.
Perfect.
So it's okay. So thank you very much, Adrián, for this introduction and for holding this webinar. I think it's very interesting and always like a very important thing that we have to do as LARC, IBRO-LARC members, as you were saying. So as Adrián was mentioning, I am part of the IBRO Latin American Regional Committee, LARC, and as we took some years ago the initiative of launching and evaluating launching a study to evaluate the gender gap among Latin America neuroscience community. So I will, in this presentation, this first one, I will bring you the original data. I will show you the results we obtained from this study, and I will tell you a bit the history of this. After my presentation, Verónica Amarante will do like some deep interpretation of the data with also the impact and perspectives that this data might have. And finally, after the break, Francesca Cirulli will, what I think the link between this study and further actions, and also the consideration of other aspects of the barriers that Latin American neuroscientists are struggling with in doing science in Latin America. So let me begin by reminding of the people that were part of this. As I was mentioning, this was an initiative of IBRO-LARC Latin American Regional Committee and was conducted as a joint project with the Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean. So here are the people that participated actively from IBRO-LARC, Cecilia Bousat, who was the church at that moment, the chair, and then Adrián Palacios and myself. And from the CEPAL side, Verónica Amarante conducted this study with the help of Cecilia Tomasini and Julieta Subic. So we worked on this project for the past couple of years, and the full version of this study is available either in Spanish or in English in CEPAL and in IBRO websites, as you can see here. And there's also a review article on summarizing with the summarized version of the results and their impact that has been published this year in IBRO Neuroscience Reports. So the purpose of this study was to gather information about gender balance among Latin American neuroscientists, which we were surprised to find that was not available. I mean, it has been largely documented that despite the advances of the participation of women in science, gender gaps still persist. And they persist in at least 3 dimensions. Horizontal segregation, meaning that the scientific areas in which men and women are inserted. Vertical segregation, meaning the progress of men and women in their training and careers. And this glass ceiling effect that involves the difficulties women face to reach high rank positions. So these gaps that are found across countries and disciplines, and their causes can be as diverse, ranging from the influence of discrimination and gender stereotypes to gender roles and family life. So although several studies reported gender inequalities in neuroscience, there were no previous reports for Latin America. And only a few studies specifically focused on how these gaps are affecting neuroscience. So that is why we performed this study, and to do this, we conducted a survey, which was electronically answered by members of 6 national societies for neuroscience in Latin America. These countries included, as you see here, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Cuba, Mexico, and Uruguay. And although the rate of responses was not the same for all the societies, we ended up with a good number of respondents and a quite good representation of at least 4 of these 6 participant countries. First comment of this, it was good to find that there were no differences in the level of education, as you can see in these graphs, between men and women. So overall, the people that were surveyed, neuroscientists surveyed, were mainly PhD students, and there were no differences in PhD and the proportion of PhDs between men and women. However, there were gender differences in the way men and women perceived how their careers were influenced by family life. And this is very interesting, as you can see here in this slide. For example, the majority of both men and women perceived that having children influenced their careers. But interestingly, only the majority of women perceived that their careers influenced in the decision of having children. So that is a very interesting difference that we found. In addition, it is also interesting, as we can see here in this graph, how this has an impact in the progress of men and women careers. You can see here the delay that having children may have on pursuing PhD studies, particularly in this case. So while men with children have a delay with respect to men without children, here we are comparing the dotted lines, the gray lines, the dotted lines versus the gray solid line. There is a delay for men. This delay, when we compare the dotted green line with respect to the solid green line, was greater for women. And this delay between women with and without children can be of more than 4 years in some cases. So to summarize the main results, the first thing to say is that we found the similar or the same trend in the Latin American neuroscience community that the one reported in other communities. For example, in this case, we are showing here vertical segregation. It's a way to represent the glass ceiling effect that we found in our data. So 1 here represents an equal proportion of men and women. So this is 1. And above 1, represent a bias towards men, and below means women bias. And in different colors, we have the different levels of the career. And so we can see here is that for all these gray dots, which are the highest level in the career, there is a bias, in some places, a very strong bias towards men. It is harder for women than for men to reach the highest levels of the neuroscience career in Latin America. And this can be seen here in the summarized or the average data, in which only the highest level was biased for men, and all the others were equal or were biased towards women. Interesting. Besides this general trends, there were also different aspects that were also found in other studies, previous studies. For example, the horizontal segregation, in which we see here that it is men are more dedicated or devoted to topics such as physics, mathematics, and engineers within neuroscience, right? And women more likely to study psychological, health, and chemical approaches to neuroscience. And also, it was very strong and important that more women than men had interrupted their training path during their careers. These are all aspects that have been previously reported in different studies. But beyond that, we found some specific traits of less reported gender biases in our study. And these specific traits, some of them can be related, or we can interpret that them are related to the specific population of Latin American neuroscientists. Some of them are just questions that have not been very much addressed in previous studies. This one, for example, is interesting. More men than women conduct their PhD studies abroad, outside their home countries. And this is especially important for our community, because being part of the mainstream neuroscience when you conduct your PhD abroad is probably having a long-term impact, having the opportunity of this long international networking at this important moment of the career of neuroscientists. So this might be some important trait that is influencing not only in the short term, but also in the long term and specific for Latin American neuroscience. This other one, I'm not sure it's specific of Latin America, but it's also interesting, is that more women than men supervise undergraduate students. And this is interesting because undergraduate students are trained in shorter periods and have like less impact than being supervising graduate students. And this is an interesting bias that we found in our data. Also, and maybe also kind of specific for Latin America, and we were quite surprised to find this, we found that a big proportion of men and women were dissatisfied with their careers. As you can see here, it's a big proportion of people that answered that they were not happy with their careers at all. And this was also biased in favor of women. And not only in the proportion of women with respect to men, but also in the reasons that they were dissatisfied with. For example, while men were dissatisfied for financial and academic difficulties in pursuing their work, women were more worried about how to conciliate work and family life. for example. And this is something that caught our attention because being neuroscientists and doing science it's a very vocational and motivational work. And we were not happy to see that our community is so dissatisfied in pursuing these careers in Latin America. So this is the summary of the data I wanted to share with you today. And I think that is now important to, the most important thing is that we have this data now, we have quantified, we have kind of an objective diagnosis of what is happening in gender imbalance documented in Latin America neuroscience community. However, we conclude that from this data, what we need to do now is to take actions in this. And we feel as LARC members that the time has come to move from awareness to action. And I will end here and give like the floor to the other panelists, but I would like to also address that from this study, we have already seen and being part of some of the actions. And I think that in our last talk today, Francesca Cirulli will also tell us about a more comprehensive and global perspective of how ALBA network and the whole Latin America neuroscience community is now seeing the barriers that are struggling our work as neuroscientists in Latin America. So thank you very much. I will stop sharing my presentation and thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana. And now we're gonna move to the second part of the first block, that is Verónica Amarante. And you can share your screen, Verónica. Okay. Perfect. We see the presentation. You can unmute. Okay. Oops. You are mute already. Okay. Perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate. As Adrián mentioned, we participated in this study as a research team in ECLAC, and none of us are neuroscientists, but we are economists mainly and a sociologist. So it was very interesting for us to find that some of the gaps that we have documented, for example, in economics, were also present in other disciplines. And so I will take just some minutes to make some final remarks and to recover some of the things that Ana said and try to think about actions or future actions. So one important thing in the data is that most of the people, both women and men, answered that the main reason for choosing neuroscience was their vocation. So this was very clear, as you can see there in the graph. More than 40% of both men and women declared that. The second reason was the influence of a teacher or the influence of a mentor. But so here we have a group of people who enter into discipline mainly due to vocation, and so it's reasonable to think that the fulfillment of this vocation would contribute to a satisfying life and being satisfied with their careers. But as Anna said, and now I have here the figures more disaggregated, a relatively high percentage of people declare that they are very dissatisfied or dissatisfied with their academic career. Among women, we have this, the percentage is almost 45% who declare being dissatisfied or very dissatisfied, and among men it's lower, it's 28%. And the reasons are similar, but there are some differences. But the access to finance and resources is something that is seen as a cause of dissatisfaction for both women and men, but also the access to research and teaching positions. And also in the case of women, the third reason is the balance between the academic life and the family responsibilities. So there is a clear association between this dissatisfaction and some aspects of the academic career related to the access to positions and probably to segregation, and also to the balance of work and family life. And another relevant aspect that we were able to find in the data is that 76% of women declared that they have feel discriminated during their working life, and for men the figure is 45%. So this is it's very consistent with the data about dissatisfaction. And also another important thing when thinking about what can be done or action is that a relevant percentage of women declared that they experience cases of sexual harassment, or they witness them. Not that they heard, because we have different possible answers. And some people said, yes, I heard it. That was mainly, I heard it happened to someone. That was mainly men. But we have 16% of women that declared that they saw it happen to someone, or they were witnesses, and 17% that declared that it happened to them. So given this panorama, it's not strange to find that most of women, 91% of women, and also a very high percentage of men, 74%, declare that they believe some policies are necessary. And we ask about a battery, a long list of policies and interventions, and most of them received were considered as important, but the main policies, both for women and for men, were equal wages policies, the existence of care services programs or childcare solutions, or some kind of subsidy or help to pay for care costs, so very much associated to the balance between family life and work. And also stop the close policies to postpone tenure evaluation of women who have children, and then programs to support people suffering from sexual and work harassment that was mostly declared by men. So we have here like a community that shows their support for some kind of action or some kind of policy movement to improve the working conditions. In terms of the stop of the clock policies, I just wanted to make a minor comments about this, because it's a policy that the first time it was implemented was in the United States, in Stanford, in the 70s. So there's a long experience with these policies. And also it is true that some evaluations from economics and from psychology show that sometimes these policies result in the long term, result in some kind of penalty for those who use it. So we have to keep that in mind also, because it's mainly due to our own unconscious biases when we are in certain positions and evaluate experiences, working experiences and academic life. So it's information that I think it's important in order to make us aware this thing, and it also explains why sometimes people choose not to take not to use these policies, because mainly because they perceive, or they may think about some negative consequences in the future. So I think that what we have here is like evidence that that in general the community supports the idea of trying to find mechanisms and policies to promote gender equity in neurosciences. I think that what we have here, what we are doing here, this increased awareness of the challenges that women face, is a very good starting point. And then the idea of finding some collective spaces where to think about these actions and to decide the best way to foster equal opportunities. I mean, in economics, for example, which is the discipline that I know most, there are there are also in neurosciences codes of professional conduct, ideas to monitor the progress of women. You know, the gathering of information of information about gender gaps in a systematic way every a certain time, just to monitor the situation. The ideas of, you know, to cite diversity, many things that are just common sense, organized conference and seminars inclusively, when we do our citations, do it diversely, you know, in our roles as mentors or as teachers, have in mind that this kind of trying to create a space that favors gender equity. So I think there is a room of possible things that can be done in a more systematic way, not just what we do as individually, as trying to follow our instinct, but just try to put it as a shared way of building the community. And a final remark about what can be further research in this area is how the different forms of segregation, horizontal generations, cause or influence the development and the composition of research groups. Anna mentioned some things about the different sub areas in the discipline. So I think there is something also interesting to research. So I will leave the floor, and thank you very much again for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you very much, Verónica. And we have time now. So for questions for this first block. So I mean, we have the chat. If everyone can, I mean, would like to have question, they can just write in the chat. But I'm wondering about the policy maker. I mean, you come from the I mean, from the economics. So I mean, how you see the projection of this type of the study? I mean, how we can move from the collecting information from people that work in the area of neuroscience to policymakers. So how we can do it? Did you have any thought about that? I mean, how we can move to action, but action through the through the public's I mean, people that make decision about, or university where you find all of this, I mean, situation that you are mentioning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that Anna, do you want to answer, or?
I think you should try to answer first, and then I can complement your answer.
I think that we should be thinking about different levels of interventions, because there are some kind of things that as I was trying to show in the last slides, that can be done at the community level, just to share some common views about how to, for example, how to try to take into account these tensions between family life and academic life. When in our positions, when we have, you know, research assistants or with our colleagues, and this is like some space. There is other space that is how we organize, for example, in the conferences, how we share the information with all the members of the community, how we make sure that the equal opportunities are open to all. I mean, we focus on, in this case, in women and men, but of course this is broader than gender gaps, and this implies other gaps. And then at the national levels, I mean, in the region, for example, in Latin America, the expansion of family, what is called family policies, is like very far from what we can find in Europe. So there is another. I mean, the region has a long path to move in order to have more inclusive family policies, or policies which are more adequate. Not this obviously does not only involve the academic life. I mean, this is like in general for the labor market. These gaps that we see here are the same in general in the labor market, in every position that, or even in some cases, more, I don't know, I don't want to say worse, because it depends on how you look at it, but more difficult even to discuss in some places, or more difficult to do these things that we are doing, like trying to share the information and to discuss what can be done. But so I think that there is like room in our, I mean, I will say as individuals, but also as in the community, to try to build on that objective of more gender equality. I don't know, Anna, if you want to speak.
I would like to add one concern that has to do with something that you said, but also to ask your opinion, is that when I analyze this data, at some point I am more worried about the biases that seem to consolidate the biases. I mean, for example, this trend of PhD men being trained abroad, that will have more opportunity in the future, or that men tend to select men as supervisors. And so these are role modelings that are like being maintained and won't change easily, because we can think of some policies and actions that can make everyone aware of what is happening and trying to, for example, I cannot imagine that we can go now to a conference in which there is a bias towards men in the plenary speakers. That is, at this point, is almost impossible. But it was the normal thing a couple or 5 years ago. Now it's impossible. That is a very good thing. We have got that. But there are some trends that are that consolidate the biases. And I would like to know your opinion on how can we attack these ones.
Well, I was thinking, for example, again, I'm going to the economics, but in the United States, there are special scholarships for women to pursue their doctoral studies. I mean, it's different because they are there in the United States, but some kind of, you know, like these positive actions are maybe a way of doing this. If this trend that men tend to go abroad a lot more, and this happens also in other disciplines. It's in every discipline, and women tend more when they pursue PhDs to do it in their countries. So some kind of, for example, of scholarships, like positive actions in both things, in a general call, and also to have some specific instruments for women. It's that could also be something that, you know, you have to balance the pros and cons, but if this is really an important issue that can be done, those things can be done. And yeah, there is a lot. They are going, as you said, as these role models that perpetuate and are difficult to be changed. And also, I would say about our own unconscious biases. What you were saying about the seminars is true. Now, I mean, the balance in the keynote speakers, it's something. I mean, it's installed, but there are studies, and very recent studies, that show that when a woman is presenting, is doing a presentation, the kind of questions on the interruptions, this also is in economics that I have seen that, but it's very well documented. It's very different how the audience receives a presentation from a female economist than from a male economist. So there are some things there that are still going on, and the things about the interruptions or the second questions, you know, re-answering when you are not comfortable about the answer, that are different. I mean, the audience is different, or treats differently a woman than a man. So those things can also be through codes of conduct, or some we can try to change that.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we can now move. See if we have more questions on this first, block, we can come back by the end. So now we want to move to the second block, that is pathways to inclusion in the Latin American neuroscience community, and our speaker, Francesca Cirulli from ALBA Network. Welcome, Francesca. So you can, okay, you're sharing your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And well, first of all, thank you for having us here. I'm here representing ALBA Network today. I'm sure that many of you already know this network that has been recently funded by a group of scientists, neuroscientists, and in particular by Carmen Sandy, that I'm sure is very well known as the past president of the FENS, the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies. ALBA is, I think it's a very, very well picked name, because it means sunrise. And so it brings an idea of something that's rising, that's new. It's a new idea of how to bring diversity and inclusion in neurosciences. But I'm sure that even if it's if this network is linked mainly to neurosciences, so whatever we do is going to have a carryover effect on many other disciplines. So I'm pretty sure about this. And why do we need this? Why do we need ALBA? We need ALBA because we acknowledge that there is still a lot to do in order to ensure diversity and equity in the way we do science. I think the discussion that we have just heard has told us that something is changing. For example, the fact that, you know, for us, I absolutely agree with Ana Silva that we are now used to the fact that in a panel there will be an equal representation of men and women. But and this is already a great achievement, I think. But of course, there are a lot of issues that are still there. Implicit bias was mentioned, and I'm sure that each one of us, and even I recognize in myself still implicit biases. And these are cultural models that are very, very difficult to change because we have been, brought up with them. So I think that there is it has to be a cultural movement, a cultural change, and this is slow, as we know. Cultural changes are slow; they take time. So what we are trying to do with ALBA is to create a new culture of how to deal with discrimination, implicit bias. How can we, for example, use training and networking and mentoring to create those networks that make minorities, women, underrepresented groups stronger? So this is really what ALBA what ALBA is. And what are the missions of ALBA? Share the best practices, share, between scientists, within scientists, how can we best act to counteract bias, recognize contributions, recognize, for example, women, recognize, people that are not necessarily, they don't have the right friends that will bring them forward for a prize, for an award. So this is really about, about ALBA. And also give instruments to support career development to all, underrepresented groups. These are the pictures of the leadership. You recognize Carmen Sandy, who is the founder and the past chair of ALBA right now. The chair of ALBA is Megan Carey, and we have a chair-elect, that's Laura Andre, that will take on in June 2022. It's a very it's a nice group of people, I must say, and we also have right now we are up to 900 members, so we've been growing very rapidly. And in addition, of course, to the leadership, to the board of directors, there are a lot of ambassadors, there are a lot of ways to be members of ALBA. So one can really join and work at different levels and trying to, to find their own spot. What are the main areas? Awareness and advocacy. And I think the most important aspect here is the declaration. We established the declaration. So there was a question before by Adrián Palacios as to how do we move to policy. One way to move to policy is to give very simple, let's call them indications, and for institutions, for policymakers, for governmental agencies, in terms of what can be done to ensure equity and inclusion. And the declaration was meant especially for this. We are trying to raise awareness through webinars. We have a webinar series, and we'll talk about that. And then we, of course, try to create visibility and recognition for women and underrepresented groups, underrepresented scientists that, in order to create also role models. I think this is also something that's missing sometimes, having someone to look up to and say, I can become like her, him. I think this is really important, highlighting success stories that you can make it, even if you come, from a background which is not the ideal one. Collecting data. This is another very important aspect. We are trying, because there are data out there, but they are not organized in a coherent way. So what we're trying to do is to create a resource that can be used by everybody, by scientists and also by policymakers, so that we can also better understand what are the causes of the discrimination that we see. And then networking and mentoring. These are really very important aspects that we are trying to bring about. What we do, for example, right now is at main conferences is to have a networking event, which sometimes is something that's very, very easy, simple. You just bring, young scientists with the leaders all together in informal atmosphere. And that can be fundamental for them to approach, the scientists that they may look up at as someone or that's unapproachable, and make him, there available. So these are the important things but very easy things that can be done to improve. Okay, this is the declaration, the ALBA declaration, and as you can see, it's a very straightforward set of facts. And the facts are that we are all biased. And what can we do? And so we suggest easy paths that can help in reducing biases. And also how to create an inclusive workplace culture. This is really, you know, there are some easy facts and easy acts that can be implemented. And this is what the declaration is really about, to acknowledge that there is bias and propose simple actions that can create a culture of awareness and reduction of the biases. And we have 215 actually organizations that have signed the declaration. And then we have a lot of individual signatories. And everybody, all of you that are listening today that would like to sign the declaration can go on ALBA website and do so. Okay, so as I was mentioning before, in trying to address diversity in different regions of the world, we have been organizing one important webinar in a collaboration with IBRO. And the webinar was, in fact, the title of the webinar was, "What are the main barriers to succeed in Latin America?" This was a very important webinar for us because we partnered with IBRO and we discussed the IBRO-LARC report, which is clearly a very, very important landmark in terms of defining what are the barriers and what can we, how can we overcome them. In addition to all the facts that have been already discussed, we sort of broadened what we analyzed, the analysis, and so that it wasn't just about gender differences and gender disparities, but it was really trying to understand what are the barriers for different groups, not just women, in Latin America. And I will go faster to, okay. I will go back to that, but I would like to continue and try to analyze what were the main discussion that came out of the webinar. And first of all, this is nothing new, but it's really important to acknowledge that there are, of course, gender inequalities, and these are in a way even greater because of the culture of Latin America, and this is something that came out very, very, very well in the webinar. Now, the one thing that we're trying to write together with ALBA Silva and the other panelists a white paper on this on the conclusions from this webinar. And I think that the very first question that we asked ourselves was, okay, but what's really different? What's really special about Latin America? Because what we have to acknowledge is that some biases are really universal. You can find them really everywhere. Gender inequalities are everywhere. But then there are specific matters that depend on the region where, you know, these biases then are found. And for Latin America, there are specific cultural aspects that make these vertical and horizontal these disparities in terms of career perspectives really special. And I was quite struck by the fact that also men find themselves sometimes discriminated. And but for women, there is still, in Latin America, there is still a culture bias that is in a way is due to the fact that the woman is seen as the one that will eventually have children, that will dedicate herself to the family, and this has important carryover effects, as Ana Silva was mentioning, on the fact that she cannot go abroad to do her PhD, because if she goes abroad how to study, then she will not have the time to grow a family, and time will pass. So this is really a very important bias, while men don't have this time dependent family. Building up a family is not time dependent. It can happen even later during their career, and so this is really an important bias. And another specific aspect has to do with this was discussed by Jose Peña, has to do with the LGBTQIA plus community. Now, I think that part of those men that felt discriminated were probably within this group, and there is a lot of isolation. There is a lot of discrimination that characterizes this group of individuals, and of course it's not easy to overcome this type of biases. There, in a way, I remember we were talking about this during the discussion during the webinar, was focused on the fact that LGBTQA persons are considered as sinful. Their behavior is seen as betraying the religion, and so there is there is the discrimination towards this group of persons is very strong, and they have a strong feeling of isolation, which of course it's can be so strong as to induce them to, for example, migrate to other countries. One aspect that we are actually that's becoming more and more important when thinking about the specific aspects of Latin America has to do with the financial situation. And the discussion during the webinar was very, at the beginning was, first of all, in terms of a geographical distribution of resources. And so there is a very unequal distribution of resources. There are a few neuroscience centers. They are all very much in big rural areas, in big cities. And so the rural areas are very much devoid of resources, and also devoid of resources for education. So there is a very strong rural versus city divide. And this already is telling us a little bit, what the action could be here, that there is a need to probably bring more education, and especially education in STEM, so that these small centers neuroscience centers can grow. And the lack of resources is also linked to another big problem that has to do with the language problem, the language barrier. Because English, of course, is the main language that it's a very important fact that there is one language that can, help all scientists to communicate. At the same time, and this is specific for Latin America more, for example, than for Asia, because we have discussed these problems also, for example, in a webinar in Asia. And in Asia, because of the history of the place where there's been, British colonies, and so English has arrived there, and so people are much more used to speaking English and learning English in school. In Latin America, English is still a foreign language, and this is really creating a very strong divide, because if you cannot access the international publications because you're not fluent in English, then you're just cut out. So this is really another very important and very peculiar aspect, I think, of Latin America. And another important aspect that we've been discussing was the training and mentoring. And this again has to do with the fact that that whoever gets into science doesn't find a very strong community to communicate with, and doesn't find a lot of mentoring, so that even young people that are dedicated or want to dedicate themselves to STEM, when they get into the lab, they really don't know what to expect. They don't know how to build a career, so they're lacking a perspective. And when you don't know, when you don't have that perspective, it becomes very, very difficult then to really create and build a career. So there is really a need for mentoring and giving the students, the young students, an adequate idea of what the path should be, to succeed in science. Okay, so what could be the solutions? Because I showed you, a lot of some of the critical points. But what would be the solutions? Well, of course, promoting, the academic careers of women, increasing financial assistance, and, for example, if we think about the English language, one thing that could be done is to dedicate funds to help scientists to write or to do to write their publications in English, or helping them as much as possible to become more proficient in English. That would of course be an open access, also provide money for open access, because that would allow more visibility for them, and this already is another very important path to become more to get them to get international visibility and international connections. The linguistic bias. This is really a very important aspect, as we've discussed, and one I would say controversial or interesting idea that came out in the webinar was to embrace multilingualism. So why should we only stick to English? Why not having? I think that in the future, with this, with the softwares that we have for translating very fast back and forth between English and other languages, I think this language barrier, in a way, could be eradicated. But there are ways that one could, think about overcoming this linguistic bias. Creating a safe work environment for LGBTQ individuals, and this has to do again with education, with explaining also young people about diversity, and this really has to do with with education that should start very early in school, and revising, of course, educational policies and training, so that young people, even before they choose a career in STEM, they are aware of what the biases are, what the path entails, and this, of course, both for men and for women. But it would help a lot women to plan ahead, because I think this is really one important aspect, right? That if you know how to plan, then you can organize yourself, and you can also, you know, decide that when to have children, how, you know, to really find a good balance between work and family life. I think this is really what it entails. To, you don't have to give up, you know, become a mother or have a family, absolutely, but you have to have the right instruments, the right tools to know how you know, how to get organized and do that nonetheless. And of course, have also a supportive environment, because that also is key, is really important. So I will stop here. I don't even know how much I talked, but I hope that I've given you a good idea of what are the barriers, what could be some solutions, what it means to be a neuroscientist in Latin America, and that some aspects of you know, that have to do with gender diversities are peculiar to Latin America. So one has to work on those if you want to really eradicate those. And I'm open to questions, of course.
Okay, thank you very much, Francesca. Very, I mean, complimentary, and wonder to know about the ALBA activity, how they are organized, and how we can also I mean, share with ALBA. And I think the idea now is just to open to the panel. I mean, we are looking for questions here, and but if we can just start ourselves. We have 20 minutes, no more than that. So if anyone in the panel would like to just to complement the ideas, I can start if you, I mean, before you prepare. And like I said, I mean, in the beginning, I'm working like an advisory, I mean, the Council of the Gender Inequalities, I mean, with the Ministry of Science, and we have working on policy for gender. I mean, that is already published. But one of the best things that has happened in Chile, at least, is that through the ministry we have create some funding. You know, now we have funding that is for science and incorporate, I mean, many, I mean, initiative in gender inequalities. So what is very, I mean, we don't, it's a solution that is came from more like a top down, because I mean, it's the government that is having, I mean, this action instrument to the institution, that they really work this issue in, I mean, within the institution. So they are like a 12 institution now that they have the power to just to create their own solution, but they need to be, I mean, tracking time. I mean, progress need to be reported every year, how the bias, I mean, are taken in care. So you mentioned, Francesca, the mentoring. Mentoring, I think, is one of the, I mean, most of the projects that we have been funding, I mean, use mentoring, has some very powerful tools. I mean, from the beginning, either in the school, I mean, go to the school and just make mentoring about the roles of women in the society, in science. I mean, what to expect, how you. This is some of the action that also ALBA network is working on. I mean, how this can be complemented about the work that has been done in IBRO-LARC about and CEPAL, and just put this in some action. I mean, make mentoring in Latin America.
What we're trying to do right now is to establish a network, a mentoring network, so that there are specific persons that you can rely on in order to get advice. But also, I think the next step is to have resources that could be for example, on our website, that could be used all over the world. to create specific mentoring programs, so that you don't have to start from scratch, but you could, you know, use that knowledge or a specific path, a specific methodology, and use that, apply that wherever you are. So I think this is something that could be very useful, and that we're going to develop in the future.
Okay. Is Verónica and Anna would like to share some?
Adrián, there is a question or a comment in the chat that I think it's interesting to read.
Okay, here we are. This is from Miguel de Leon. Say, I am first generation college graduate who is now in a PhD program in STEM. I am the only member of the Latinx community in my department, and this has been proven to be a challenge. Seeing and hearing Dr. Cirulli speak about the inadequacy in training and mentorship has really elucidated issues in DII in my university. I don't know what is there, but
diversity and inclusion.
Diversity and
and I have inspired me to try to make a change for my community here. Thank you very much.
That's good.
We're
happy.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Miguel, for that comment.
I do have a comment that I would like to share about the maybe like confronted feelings about trying to be, of course, part of the international community, and also be coherent or be aware of our own way of doing, the way we are as local communities. So, for example, I think that in that sense, we struggle a lot to feel not to try to belong to the big community, but also it is important to feel like some kind of pride, or to be proud of belonging to these local communities with their own profile, their own ways of understanding and doing things, even because we are also trying to do this in our own countries that have other problems, and maybe our research can help in some way to solve solutions that are also specific to this country. So I think that it is very important to do not feel that we lack things to be part of the mainstream community, but to understand that it should be welcoming, and it should be that everyone has a place in this big community. And sometimes I see that we are trying to struggle and to catch up, and there are less actions or less thinking on how making the whole community aware that we are different people, and that everyone can pursue a scientific career belonging to wherever we are living and doing science.
Yeah, so, I agree very much with Anna. That one also we don't have to think about leveling everything. It's I think there is a lot of richness in each culture, in each region, and that should not be cancelled at all. But to bring rules that can help within those cultural differences, I think that's really the key, and it's not easy. It's not easy sometimes because we feel, I myself feel that, for example, the American culture is very strong, and sometimes we sort of, we feel like we want to belong to that, and in that sense we forget, our origins and who we are. But we shouldn't do that. We should really use the best to create, better living conditions. There is a question in the chat by Andrew, who says it's absolutely necessary to extend this study to other regions, example Africa. We are actually tomorrow. There is a webinar that we are organizing. That ALBA is organizing. Our group is organizing on the MENA region. So that's Middle East and North Africa. If you're interested. Tomorrow afternoon. And we are also right now with World Women in Neuroscience. We are also organizing another one that will include the rest of Africa. And this is organized for the end of January, if you're interested. But whoever is interested in these webinars and in looking at these problems in different regions, you can follow up our webinars on the ALBA website. So clearly we are trying to do this reasoning, bring this reasoning in other regions of the world. And as I was telling you, we have in Asia, for example, there are very different problems. I mean, the problems are similar, but the cultural background is such that they have to be tackled in a different way. So it's I think it's really very enriching to be able to compare and contrast between different regions in the world.
We have like the result of a poll. I mean, we have make question to the person that are in the attending, and the question was, do you have experience of the diversity and inclusion barriers in neuroscience as discussed in this webinar? There 11% say that yes, personally in Latin America. 56%, 60% yes, personally in other part of the world. And 30% say no, but I want to know how to improve things for others. So there are many more people that are from not Latin America, from other part of the world that would like to know how to improve things for others. So this is a very good, I mean, result. I mean, just to move on. I mean, we need to move on and just continue to this. I mean, hopefully that every region can also have their own, I mean, contribution to that. I mean, to that subject that is very important. This is for the poll. There are other people that are also answering, and there are also comments in the chat. This I did not participate in the Latin webinar, but I think you captured perfectly our problem. I think it's sad, recognize it, that we want to compete at international level, but we have really an even a starting point of access. Yeah, this is a very good point. I mean, everyone would like to have solutions, but we are the starting point. I mean, is so different. I mean, when you just this same subject, I mean, in Europe or United States or Canada, or I mean, they are so different from what we are experience in Latin America or Caribbean. I mean, so I mean, we need to flat some kind of the starting point. I mean, for that. I don't know if you have more comments from the panel. If not, we can maybe, we have a couple of minutes, but we can just stop here, and the webinar will be in the channel, I mean, in YouTube, I mean, for people just to look at the webinar. So, I mean, this is going to be open to more participants. It is going to be also announced in the web page of IBRO. So, okay, if there are not more comments for us, we hope that this initiative will allow us to build a better society, and this is very important. And we thank all of you for your participation. And as I repeat, the content of this webinar will be soon in a YouTube channel, and it's going to be directly accessed from the IBRO webpage. And thank everyone to have, I mean, attended the chat, I see the chat is also saying many thanks for the team. Okay.
Okay, thank you
Thank you very
much.
much.
Thank you.
See you
Bye
soon.
bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.